If you're wondering about the thumbnail image, don't worry, it's not canon. As far as I know, they're just discarded sketches from the first season. Although for a sketch, the burnt part strikes me as odd, and that's because there's a record of a side story where Priscilla burns part of Aldebaran's face. Could it be that this was actually an official design, but was discarded for some reason we don't know? Whatever the case, there's already enough mystery surrounding today's episode without adding more. Honestly, the episode was insane. It had everything. Revelations about Aldebaran, Echidna, and Flugel. There was even a mention of Pandora. I'm really excited to do this today. So much so that I've just come from rereading not only the episode several times, but I've also reread all the side stories that are referenced throughout Chapter 52. I reread them mostly to better understand the references Aldebaran was making in those novels about his past. So I hope you can understand my decision not to greet the channel members on this occasion. Truly, my apologies in advance, but my desire to get started with the video as soon as possible is just too strong. Welcome to the analysis and recap of ReZero Arc 9, Chapter 52. Honestly, regarding the Emilia and Aldebaran part, I have mixed feelings. It's not that I didn't like it. It's always good to see Aldebaran fight, but today's episode was alternating between glimpses of the traitor's past and moments from their fight. I was much more interested in his past, and I even started to feel annoyed every time we returned to the present. In any case, I'll briefly analyze the most interesting parts of the fight. Emilia's fight covers from the moment we see her chasing Aldebaran with her wings up to the part where the traitor decides to throw the largest rock he can create at her, the rock he had previously created to stop fighting her in their first encounter. From the fights, we can infer some interesting things. Aldebaran once again references that he finds it difficult to deal with Emilia, and that's due to certain elements rooted in his very being. This is interesting because later we will see it repeated that Echidna created Aldebaran. It wouldn't be strange to think that for this creation, someone else was taken as a model or a base. This base could be the protagonist himself or Flugel himself. I'm not going to lie to you, today's episode has led to a new theory forming. I'm not talking about the theory that Al is Subaru, but that Al is actually a copy of Flugel, a person we have record of who lived 400 years ago, while Subaru is apparently someone recent. In short, according to this theory, Aldebaran is the older copy of Flugel, and Subaru is the more recent copy. The episode also makes it clear that no matter how many attempts Aldebaran makes, there will be things he cannot replicate, things like Emilia's skill and dexterity in combat. It was already said that no matter how much Aldebaran imitates Emilia's techniques, the copied techniques he managed were still losing against her. If it seemed like he had any chance until now, it was simply because the traitor was doing a great job defending himself. It's said that to match Aldebaran's altitude, Emilia continuously created ice pillars in the air and used them as platforms to gain height. However, in order to do so, she had to stomp on each pillar with all her strength. This way, the ice pillars would go flying towards the earth. The protagonist would then dispel them and summon them again. All of this was a process that required unique talent and physical strength. It was such a major feat that it was truly surprising Emilia did it on the first try. The traitor just saw this and stated he could never do it. I state this because I see some people thinking that Aldebaran can do any type of magic at the maximum level if he just does loops. But the truth is that even with the unlimited attempts he has, he can only reach a certain power with his spells. So don't be surprised if later the author, taking advantage of this limitation, uses this to leave Aldebaran in a no-win situation. The chase continues for a bit longer, and Aldebaran uses more strategies to shake her off. For example, it's said he repeats a strategy he used in his fight against Reinhard, but it's not a big deal narratively speaking. In the end, fed up with Emilia not giving in, he summons a giant rock in order to get rid of her for good. Leaving the half-elf aside, let's now move on to Rem. Although she doesn't appear in the episode, she does appear in the form of a mention. You see, today's chapter delves deeper into Aldebaran's ability and reveals that when he referred to the shattering of his domain, he wasn't referring to destroying something physical or something in the environment, but that his domain can be destroyed simply by removing him from the area of his ability. Since Aldebaran was thrown into the sky at the beginning of the fight, falling continuously was the worst-case scenario for the traitor because it didn't matter if he re-established his domain. As he continued to fall, this new domain would eventually break. He didn't regain control of the situation until he managed to craft the wings, and only now can he stay within the range of his ability. But getting back to Rem, the way Aldebaran talks about her really caught my attention. You see, there was a failed loop in the past where Aldebaran found out that Rem was still alive. At the time, he was surprised because according to him, that shouldn't be possible. Since that loop was redone, Aldebaran forgot that knowledge, which is why he is now doubly confused. because when Rem's memories were restored in his mind, so was the information that she was dead. I'll make a parenthesis here to remind you that Echidna's authority is basically her tome of wisdom, which allows her to see the past, present, and future. Therefore, I don't find it far-fetched to believe in the possibility that Echidna could inform her student in advance of certain key future events. We have evidence that Aldebaran knew of Reinhard even without having met him, or knew Ram's name without knowing her. So it's not crazy to believe that he had the information that the girl named Rem would be dead by the beginning of the anime. What's more, in the recent Omega novel, it's said that Echidna's Castle of Dreams, that is, the place where she meets and conducts the trials, is not a place that changes just because, but rather it changes due to a technique called dream arts. What I'm getting at is that Aldebaran already knew the appearances of certain people because Echidna could have recreated many scenarios and characters for her pupil. Now you're probably wondering, but if Echidna's power is so accurate in predicting the future, why is Rem still alive? That's because the series always talks about Subaru as someone capable of going against fate. In fact, today's reading clarifies that trait of his, and this angers the traitor because he believes the protagonist could have truly saved Priscilla. And in case you doubt this info about Subaru going against fate, the text takes the opportunity to communicate that Aldebaran is also hated by fate itself. I think by this point illustrates itself. Afterward, there's a bit more talk about the levels of complexity of magic, but I already touched on this in my video about the fight against the dragon, so let's move on to the other section of the video and the most interesting one of today. Finally, the past that everyone wanted to see has arrived. I'm aware that there were already side stories about Aldebaran and Echidna's past, but while those side stories narrated the training processes they had, today's episode mentions the beginning, middle, and end of the meetings the traitor had with his master. I always see people say that the author is disorganized for putting important lore in side stories, and while this is true, it's also true that he ends up putting the most important parts of these subplots into the main story. I'm sure this will make more than one person decide to read No Stella, No Life, which are side stories that tell us about the days Echidna and Aldebaran spent together planning their objective, the objective to kill Satella. I'll be honest, in the traitor's side stories, we already knew Aldebaran had something to do with her, but we didn't know exactly what. In fact, in the story called Sunlight on the Water, an enemy appears that takes the form of what a person fears most. And when this enemy appeared before Aldebaran, it took the form of the witch. At the time, some of us believed that Aldebaran tried to save her, and that's why the enemy took that form, to remind him that he couldn't do it. But no, today's episode revealed that he actually tried to kill her, which is completely insane. Because since everyone was under the assumption that Aldebaran is Subaru, everyone expected that just as Subaru wants to save Satella, then logically Aldebaran was also going to save her. But we saw that was not the case. In fact, he lost his arm in this attempt to kill her. Personally, I imagine that if Aldebaran couldn't kill her, it was because of Satella. Remember that the witch and Satella are entities living in the same body. It could have happened that one way or another, Aldebaran hesitated at a critical moment, and he paid for this hesitation with his defeat and his arm. But why do I assume Aldebaran tried to save Satella if it was said today that he had to kill her? You see, in a side story, it's told how Aldebaran decided to save a girl, and when asked why he did it, he says he did it because the silver hair of this girl he had just saved brings him memories of a past where he couldn't save another person. I think that in his final duel with the witch, Aldebaran was going to kill her, but when he discovered Satella's personality, he hesitated and ended up failing. That's why this novel makes this contradictory reference. In fact, in that same story, a mystery was mentioned that was answered today. Aldebaran was facing a rival at that moment, and when classifying her by her strength, he says that this woman is among the 4 strongest opponents he has ever faced. And when asked who are number 1 and 2, he says it's better not to say. After what was revealed today, it's a safe bet that number 1 is Satella and number 2 is Sekhmet. I don't count Echidna because she was his ally, not his enemy. And I mention Sekhmet because whenever she is talked about, it's said she is the strongest after Satella. And yes, it also seems that Aldebaran knew her. But enough of recaps. Let's get back to today's chapter. I'll comment on a few more things, and then finish with something exclusive. I'll tell you how I believe things happened chronologically, but let's wait a little longer for that. Among other interesting revelations, it's commented how the Echidna who is with Aldebaran mentions that she did not create Beatrice, which is somewhat contradictory, because the Echidna that Subaru met claims that while she didn't create the girl, she was involved a little in the process. This makes me think that in reality, the Echidna that Subaru saw is not the same Echidna that Aldebaran saw. I don't say this just because of the discrepancy in the Beatrice data, but also because the traitor claims that his teacher is not a liar. In fact, he starts to cry when, due to his incompetence in killing the witch, he turned her words about him into a lie. Those words that said he wouldn't lose to anyone. So, Aldebaran's echidna is not a liar while Subaru's echidna is? I would like to tell you that's the case, but unfortunately, it's only a probability, but a probability that helps to distinguish these two. Personally, I don't believe much in this theory, and that's because I think that in reality, both echidnas are the same. It's just that since Subaru is an improved version of Aldebaran, he was able to detect the lies that Echidna tried to slip past him, unlike Aldebaran, who believed she didn't lie to him. In fact, Aldebaran states that although he spoke with other witches, he spoke with them in a place prepared in advance by his master, which is a bit confusing because we know that Echidna manifests the witches without needing to disappear herself. This was a lie she tried to slip past Subaru, but the protagonist managed to realize it. After this Beatrice detail comes an interesting mention, a mention of Pandora. I'll clarify that at no point in the chapter is the name of the Witch of Vainglory pronounced, but what is mentioned is the word fiction. How is the word fiction related to vainglory? Simple, in the Japanese alphabet, the way both words are written is similar. That's why Echidna, in the middle of the battle against the witch, mentions this similarity but instantly says that they are actually different words. In any case, she states that it's an expression that reminds her of someone she detests. If you are Japanese, this is enough of a clue for you to understand she was referring to Pandora just by seeing the writing. But since there are no Japanese speakers in my audience, the final clue we have is in a side story where Echidna, in her meeting with Aldebaran, talks about Pandora and expresses herself negatively about her, thus matching the aversion she has for her in today's episode. I know that maybe someone watching this might say this is unheard of, that we don't need to read a side story to find this out, but guys, remember that this subtle detail was written in Japanese. When translated, a part of the meaning was retained, but not all of it. This is a matter of language barriers. But getting back to the topic, after the reference to Pandora, Echidna seals Aldebaran with the same spell he used on Subaru, and in this way, the traitor is isolated from time and wakes up approximately 380 years later. The place where he wakes up is the Colosseum. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Colosseum where Subaru would also eventually arrive in the Wallachia arc. Apparently, this Colosseum was the place where Aldebaran and Echidna fought against the witch 400 years ago. And 4 centuries later, in the midst of the war for the Empire, the witch would teleport Subaru to that place. Unironically, I think Arc 9, by giving these details, greatly improves Arc 7 in retrospect, and it will improve it even more with what I'm about to say. In theory, the Aldebaran who arrived at this moment is an Aldebaran who still had his arm cut off from his recent battle with the witch. Why is the severed arm relevant? Simple. It's known that when Subaru arrived at this place in the future, there was an elderly healer named Null, who is said to have started practicing this profession when he put a bandage on a gladiator who had lost his arm. I know this seems like just a coincidence, and of course, Null wasn't necessarily the one who bandaged Aldebaran, but what makes me believe it was him is that in the future, he would become friends with Subaru. This old man's life as a healer began with Aldebaran, and his life as a medic ended when Subaru took him out of the place. Because of this parallel that unites both protagonists, I firmly believe that Old Null is the person who attended to Aldebaran when he arrived. I don't just believe this because it fits chronologically with the events, but also because the way the old man related to both of them is a great detail. But I think the time has come to say, based on everything revealed, how I believe the events of Aldebaran's story happened and how it connects with Subaru. I ask you to please remember that what I'm about to communicate is not canon. It's only a representation of what I believe could have happened based on the revelations of today's episode. First, I don't think there are 2 echidnas. That is, I don't think Subaru met one and Aldebaran met another. What I think happened is that in reality, they are both the same. Chronologically, 400 years ago, this echidna created Aldebaran and trained him with the objective of killing Satella. Aldebaran lost the duel and his arm, but not before being saved by Echidna, who sealed him and released him approximately 4 centuries later. By sending her ally to the future, Echidna was left alone and faced the witch's wrath. It is said in today's novel that by the time she saved the traitor, she had already been dismembered by Satella. Echidna's body disappeared, but her soul, or a piece of her soul, was lucky and was taken to the sanctuary. Who took Echidna to the sanctuary? Well, it was Clint. When he was the dragon, he took her soul to that place. Why only her soul and not her body? Because as I said a moment ago, this Echidna's body was destroyed, not to be confused with the body of Betty's mother Echidna, which is different. We know that the reason Clint goes crazy for children is because he is capable of seeing people's souls, so it's not far-fetched to believe that he managed to rescue part of this echidna's soul and then took her to the sanctuary as the canon says. In fact, I'm almost certain that if Klein was able to take Echidna's soul, it's because right after Aldebaran's defeat, the heroes from 400 years ago sealed Satella. Time would pass, and Echidna would spend 400 years there, and according to the record she had from her power that allows her to see the future, she predicted that Subaru would come to the place. But since Subaru is a chaotic entity that defies fate, he came much earlier, and that's why upon meeting him, she tells him he arrived earlier than expected. Then the events of the second season would happen, and she would end up being reborn as Omega. Later, in one of her latest novels as this reborn entity, Echidna speaks and says something interesting. She says that no one has the guarantee of not dying, except for a boy she knows. Obviously, at this moment, she is talking about Subaru, but then she adds that even she has already died once. I think when she says she has died, she was referring to the moment she was exterminated by Satella. And in this way, this whole chronological order I mentioned would connect to the present day with her and Aldebaran's story. We are already at 60 to 70% of the overall story. I think there is no more room to introduce new characters, and if they do appear, they will be characters who have already been mentioned and have been given a background but have not yet been formally introduced. This theory I've told you is a theory I was discussing with some friends, but it's not a theory made up on a whim. Rather, it's one made based on confirmed events from the novel. I clarify this because I think that lately, the meaning of this word has been greatly distorted. I think a theory is not about saying the most random thing that comes to your mind and hoping it comes true, but rather it's about substantiating something concrete based on proven things that come together naturally as you expose your point. I want to believe that's the case with what I said, and if not, no problem. I think we're all mature enough not to get angry over silly things like that. I am aware that this theory may have weaknesses, but I ask you to remember that we still don't know Aldebaran's entire past, and I trust that if there is any weakness, it will soon be explained by the author. I was going to end the video here, but there is some material I omitted because I couldn't find a natural way to integrate it into the video. Since I feel it would be a waste not to show it, I will show some interesting data about Echidna so that each of you can draw your own conclusions. Thank you for reaching this part of the video. Discussing this theory has made me want to republish an old theory I know about Arc 6, which I think is very connected to the Flugel plan that Echidna mentions here. So I propose something to you. If this video, in Spanish and English, reaches 200 likes and 150 comments in 2 days, I will momentarily stop making the cut content and I will start creating the video about the general theory of Arc 6, or rather, the general theory of the 4th season, which is referenced today by Echidna. I also want to announce that soon I will be opening commissions for videos and shorts. I'm mainly doing it to be able to cover the costs I have regarding the gifts you see in the video and the payments to the editors. So if you commission one from me, I would appreciate it like you have no idea. And you would also be helping me bring more content to the channel. But that's all for today. Before we go, I ask you to tell me, what did you think of today's episode?